So today we get to do trigonometry. Super excited. So first, let's go over what trigonometry means. It just means triangle measurement. When we did the 30, 60, 90 and the 45, 45, 90 triangles, those are triangles that are set. But in trigonometry, you might have degrees that's like 28 degrees or 38 degrees or whatever. So that's when trigonometry comes into play. So first, let's talk about the triangle terminology. You're always going to have an angle. The opposite side is the side opposite that angle. So directly across from that angle is the opposite side. Our angle is always going to be represented by this thing called theta, T-H-E-T-A. It's a circle with a line through it. So anytime you see the angle, the side directly across is called the opposite side. Angle, opposite, angle, opposite. Are you guys okay with locating the opposite? Okay. The adjacent side is probably the hardest one to find, but if you remember where the hypotenuse is, it's the side that's not the hypotenuse. So you're going to have your theta, your angle, and it's not the side opposite, and it's not the hypotenuse, it's the other side. So it's right next to the angle. Even though the hypotenuse and that side are both next to the angle, do you see that? It's not the hypotenuse side. So the adjacent side is next to the angle, but not the hypotenuse. And then the hypotenuse is pretty easy to locate because it's always across from your right angle. That's your hypotenuse. So are you guys okay with that? Okay. Now, the keys you're going to be using on your calculator, I should have pulled up a calculator for today. Let me pull it up real quick. There's some keys on your calculator that have S-I-N, C-O-S, and T-A-N. Those are the keys that you're going to be using on your calculator. So I'm going to pull that up so that you can see that. While that's pulling up, we'll look at this. So we get to talk about that weird thing called Sohcahtoa. Did you hear that on the song? Sohcahtoa.
Yeah.
That helps us remember where everything goes on these triangles. So you have to remember how to spell Sohcahtoa. Now I went to East Central, and so they might teach things a little bit different. But to learn how to spell Sohcahtoa, this is how I remember it. It's some old hippie caught another hippie tripping on acid. That's how they taught me, and that's how I learned it, and I've never forgotten how to spell it. So you have to remember how to spell that. Some old hippie caught another hippie tripping on acid. Now there's some other ways we got online last year and looked, and but there are ways that you won't remember. Like one was like some old horse caught another horse taking oats away. It's like, that's dumb. But you're going to remember some old hippie caught another hippie tripping on acid, right? Hopefully. Okay, so the S-O-H part stands for sine, and sine always equals that opposite side over the hypotenuse side. So on your calculator, that's the S-I-N button right here. It's like, if you find mode and you go down 1, 2, 3, there's the sine button. It looks like sin in your calculator. See, the "cuh" part, like you're my cousin, cuh. The "cuh" part, the C stands for cosine. That's always the adjacent side over the hypotenuse. So Sohcahtoa, toa, the T part stands for tan, and tan is always opposite over adjacent. Tangent's the only one that has no hypotenuse. So anytime there's no hypotenuse, you automatically know it's tangent that we're going to use. So on the calculator, there's the sine button, the cosine button, and the tangent button. Tan is right next to divide. So those are the buttons you're going to be using on your calculator today. So Sohcahtoa, some old hippie caught another hippie tripping on acid. So you remember how to spell it. So you know sine is always opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. So, for example, if I need to find the sine of angle A, sine is the so part, some old hippie. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so you find your angle A. You go opposite, which is lowercase a. hypotenuse, which is C, so it's A over C.
Mm-hmm.
The part, the cosine part, is C-A-H, caught another hippie, so it's adjacent over hypotenuse. So if that's angle A, the adjacent side is B, hypotenuse is C, so B over C. Tangent is TOA, no hypotenuse. So you'll never use the hypotenuse on tangent. It's TOA, opposite over adjacent, so it's small letter A over B. So all trigonometry is ratios, fractions, that's it. So you're going to have some problems where you have to write the ratio for sine, cosine, and tangent. Whoops. For sine, cosine, and tangent of angle A or angle B, whatever they ask you to. You won't ever have to write it for the hypotenuse, for the right angle. So if I do sine A, cosine A, tan A, I have to remember Sohcahtoa. Do you remember how to spell it? Some old hippie. Yay! So first I'm going to do sine, and then the O stands for opposite, H stands for hypotenuse. So what's the opposite of angle A? What is that number? 7. What's the hypotenuse length? 25. So your ratio is 7 over 25. That's it. Okay, let's try another one. So cosine of angle A. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. What's the adjacent side to angle A? 24. It's the side next to, but not the hypotenuse. So 24 over, what's the hypotenuse? 25. Tangent is TOA. There's no hypotenuse. Do not use the hypotenuse. It's opposite over adjacent. So what's opposite angle A? 7 over 24.
Oh, this is not that hard.
It's not that bad. So all trigonometry is ratios. Ratios. Okay, let's try another one. And these I think I have on here. Okay, so let's do Sohcahtoa. Some old hippie caught another hippie tripping on acid. So if I look at angle E and I'm doing sine, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. What's the opposite of E? 6. What's the hypotenuse? 10. Reduce it if you can. What's that reduce to? 3 over 5. Okay. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So what's the adjacent side to E? 8 over hypotenuse. So that would be 4 over 5. Tangent is the only one. No hypotenuse. So don't use 10, but what's the opposite?
6 over 8.
6 over 8. That reduces to 3 over 4. So what if I'm asked to do the letter F? So if I look at the letter F, sine of F, so now I'm looking at F, what is the opposite? 8 over 10. That reduces to 4 over 5. Okay, what's the adjacent side to F? 6 over 10. 3 over 5. And then tangent?
8 over 6.
8 over 6. 4 over 3. Do you notice that the tan of E and the tan of F are just the reciprocals of each other? Cosine of E is the same as sine of F. Sine of E is the same as cosine F. It always works that way. Okay, let's get into the fun stuff. You ready to use your calculator? Okay, on these problems, these example problems, I have these blanks that we're going to fill in, and that's going to help us decide which trigonometry function to use. Now, eventually, I'm going to take these fill-in-the-blanks away. So I'm starting off with fill-in-the-blanks to help you. Eventually, I'm taking them away, and you're going to have to know how to do it without the fill-in-the-blanks. You have to remember, if x is ever on top, we multiply. If x is up high, that's how you know to multiply. If x is on bottom, you divide. So let's remember, some old hippie caught another hippie tripping on acid. So on this first example, the circle with the line through it is always the angle. So what's your angle in this example problem? 64. So that's where that goes, and that is called a theta, T-H-E-T-A, theta. A stands for adjacent, O stands for opposite, H stands for hypotenuse. I always start with the hypotenuse because that's the easiest side to find. So notice that there is no hypotenuse here. No hypotenuse. So we know we're going to have to use tangent eventually. I'm just going to put a line through hypotenuse. No hypotenuse. What is the opposite, the O side? X. And then what's the A side, the adjacent side? 7. So now that I know there's no hypotenuse, I have to use tan. So when you write the equation, this is how you write it. You always write tan or sine or cosine, whichever it is. Then you have to put the angle next to that. So what's the angle? What's the theta? 64 equals, you have to put O over A. So what goes on top? X over 7. X is up high. That's how you know to multiply. So you take the number over by the X first in your calculator, and you're going to do 7 times tan 64. So you would do 7 times, do you know where the tan button is in the calculator? Next to division, tan 64. You do not have to close the parentheses, it doesn't make you. Hit enter. So my answer is 14 point, let's say 4. That's all we have to do is find X. Okay, on this one there's 2 thetas. You get to pick which one you want to use. Which one?
23.
23, okay. 23, so now we're going to focus on angle 23. Let's start with a hypotenuse. Is there a hypotenuse? No, no hypotenuse. So do we know which one we're going to use? If there's no hypotenuse? Tan. Okay, TOA. Okay, we're focusing on angle 23. What is the opposite side? X. What's the adjacent side? 6. So when I write my equation, I know since there's no hypotenuse, I have to use tan. So I write out tan. What do I put next to the tan?
23.
23 equals, and you have to do opposite over adjacent. So what's X over 6? X is up high. That's how we know to multiply. What number should I type in my calculator first? 6. So I do 6 times tan 23, hit enter, and my answer is 2.5. So we use trigonometry if we don't have 30, 60, 90, or 45, 45, 90 triangles. Because sometimes angles are different, so that's why we use trig. Okay, what would my theta be on this one? 35. And then, like I said, I always start with the hypotenuse because that's the easiest one to find and work my way up. So what's my hypotenuse? 20. What's my opposite? X. And this time I do not have an adjacent, an A. Which one of these up here does not have an A? So, sine. S stands for sine, so I put S-I-N. It looks like sin. If you ever called it sin, I won't count it wrong. What do you think I put next to sin? 35. And then you have to put O over H. So what goes on top? X over 20. X is up high. That's how you know to multiply. What number do I type in the calculator first? So 20 times sine 35. 20 times sine 35. 11.5. Okay, we get to pick our theta on this one. I think I want to pick 62 just so that we can use something different. So I'm going to say 62, but you can pick if there's 2 angles. I'm going to start with hypotenuse. What's my hypotenuse? X. What's my opposite? There's no opposite. Do you see that? Leave it blank. What's my adjacent side? 50. So now I have to look for the one without an O. Which one does not have an O? C-A-H, the C side. So C stands for cosine, C-O-S. What do I put next to cos? What do I write? 62 equals, you have to put A over H. So what's your A? 50 over X. X is on bottom this time, so you divide. Still type that number over by the X first. Sean, are you with me?
Mm-hmm.
You get this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You have to type this number over by the X first, so the 50 first. So 50 divided by cosine, what is it, 62? I forgot.
62.
Yep, 62. Hit enter, and it's 106.5. So 106.5. So these fill in the blanks are there to help you decide which one to use, but eventually I'm going to take those fill in the blanks away. And you're going to have to be able to just look at it and go, okay, there's no hypotenuse, so I know to use tan or whatever. Okay, sometimes the theta is x. So if x is ever the angle, we're going to use, it's called inverse trig, and it's going to be that second button that we're going to use. So do you see above sine, cosine, and tangent, there's the sine -1, cosine -1. You're going to use those if you don't know the angle. So if the theta is ever x, like on all of these, you're going to use the second button. So I've got some old hippie caught another hippie tripping on acid. So again, I'm going to fill in these blanks. What's my hypotenuse here? No hypotenuse. So which one are we going to use? Toa. So I know it's going to be the tan part, tan x, but I got to fill in the rest of this. So I look at my angle. What's the opposite? 9. What's the adjacent? 3. So tan x equals opposite over adjacent. So what on top of what? 9 over 3. So this is what it's going to look like in your calculator. You're going to push the second button, second tan. Then just use that N over D button, 9 over 3. Hit enter, and that means it's about 71.6 degrees. So we just found the angle, 71.6 degrees. So our theta is x again. What's the hypotenuse? 20. What's the opposite? Nothing. What's the adjacent? So we don't have an O. What's the only one without an O? Cosine. So I do cosine x, because I don't know the angle. The angle always goes next to sine, cosine, or tangent. And then you do A over H. So what over what? 16 over 20. So second cosine, 16 over 20. Hit enter, and I get 36.9 degrees. How do you guys feel? Feel okay?
Tired.
Tired? Okay, one more. What's my hypotenuse? 5. What's my opposite?
4.
There is no adjacent, so what's the only one without an A? So sine x. Sounds like nasal spray. Sine x. And yes, it's 4 over 5. So you use the second button, second sine, 4 over 5. Hit enter, 53 degrees about. Okay, that's all there is to trigonometry. It's so fun. And then you can sound so smart. You can be like, yeah, I'm working on trig. Okay, so you're going to have some problems on your assignment where you're going to have these boxes and you figure out what the missing box is. Just put an X wherever the box is. So now your decision is, do I multiply, do I divide, or do I use the second button? So if X is ever the angle, use the second button. So you just do second tan 3.5, hit enter, and it's 74 degrees. Okay, what if X is up high? Multiply. What number do you type in the calculator first? 20. So you do 20 times tan 34. 20 times tan 34. And you get 13.5. Ryan, you okay with this? Okay. So 13.5. What if X is on bottom? What do? Divide. What number do you type in the calculator first? 4 divided by tan 2. 4 divided by tan 2. And I get 114.5. And x is the angle. What do we do? Second. Second tan 90. Second tan, whoops. Second tan 90. Hit enter and it's 89. That's it. So I got some jokes. I got a few jokes. After what have we learned? That's not a joke. We learned Sohcahtoa. Some old hippie caught another hippie tripping on acid. If x is on bottom, divide. If x is on top, multiply. If you're solving for a side, you use regular sine, cosine, or tangent. If you're solving for an angle, use the second button. Why didn't sine and tan go to the party? Just 'cause. And add a confession, the priest. Tell me your sin. Me. Opposite over hypotenuse. And prehistoric dodgeball. Okay, you can stop recording. Thank you, Micah.